You are listening to the Unhappy Hour Sports Radio Show on the newamericanmedia.com.
So what we're doing today, everybody, thank you very much again for sticking around and joining us. I am Brian Engelman, your host for the Unhappy Hour, Cleveland-centric, Los Angeles-based sports show. We're kind of tweaking the format a little bit here. We're hitting these breaks and we're chopping the show up into pieces so that you can check it out on YouTube and spread it around because the NBA draft is very popular right now. Obviously, a lot of teams that are not named Miami Heat or Oklahoma City Thunder, we're all trying to figure out how we can get better. So what we're doing is we're splitting the show up into different pieces, and we do hope that you can hit subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube so that you can get all of our updates when we put our new shows up here. Zach, we're kind of wrapping up the NBA draft stuff here. We hit a lot of the big names, but one of the things you and I have kind of touched on before and haven't really expanded upon is some of the different intricacies, the nuances of the NBA draft compared to the NFL draft or the, any other draft really. It's different how some of the trades go down and some of the conditional picks. So, maybe if we could split this up into different pieces here. Can you tell us a little bit about how the trades are different from other sports, say the NFL, for example?
Yeah, let's say the NBA draft. A lot of players, just because your team drafts a player in the NBA draft doesn't mean he's going to be on your team, come the end of the night. That happens a lot in the NBA where, for instance, when the when the Portland Trailblazers selected, Chicago Bulls selected, I believe it was LaMarcus Aldridge at 2, and the Portland Trailblazers selected Tyrese Thomas at 4. They wound up swapping both players, and that happens. It's very common in the NBA. The only time you've ever seen that in the NFL was with Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers. The NFL trades are always made before the picks. That's just how it works. The NBA is completely different. Trades are made. They trade the draft rights to the player after the team drafts him. So let's say on draft night, the Cavaliers really, really want Kid Gilchrist, and the Bobcats really want Thomas Robinson, but they're afraid they're not going to be able to get Thomas Robinson. The Cavaliers are afraid they're not going to kill Kid Gilchrist, won't fall to 4, but the Bobcats are certain that Thomas Robinson will. So then the Cavaliers can go and select Thomas Robinson. The Bobcats would go and select Michael Kidd Gilchrist, and then you talk about a swap for pick. That could definitely happen on draft night. And also, there's a scenario where the Cavaliers made the Ramon Sessions trade last year. We do not own the Los Angeles Lakers pick next year. We own the Miami Heat. And we have the ability next year to swap the Heat pick with the Los Angeles Lakers. So let's say Miami's drafting 27 next year, or 28, and the Lakers are selecting 17. We have the ability to swap that, so the Lakers would then be picking 27th, and the Cavaliers would be selecting 17. Trades just work out differently in the NBA than they do in the NFL. It's just completely different. And also in the NBA, you can protect a trade. If you want to trade a player, kind of like what New Jersey did this year, New Jersey traded a protected top 3 pick to Portland. They acquired Gerald Wallace. And had that pick been in the top 3, New Jersey would have been able to keep their pick, and Portland would have owned their first-round pick next year.
Now, do you think this is clever GMs? Do you think people get suckered into bad deals like Seward's Folly signing away Alaska for a couple of bucks from the Russians, or Manhattan for some beads?
King in New Jersey got suckered into that deal. He traded for a 33-year-old or 32-year-old power forward on the decline in order to keep Darren Williams in town, who suddenly... Gerald Wallace already opted for free agency. He's a free agent this coming year. He opted out of his deal. So when you look at that, you just look like we gave up the top 6 pick for a guy that we're not going to the play. We didn't make the playoffs last year. We did it to keep Darren Williams in town, but he's already opted out of his deal. What was the point in that? I looked at it. They could have had Gerald Wallace in free agency this year. That's why the deal made no sense to me when they made it at the time. And I'm just sitting there I was like, you have to be kidding me. The only thing that's going to keep Darren Williams in the net this offseason, in my opinion, is Dwight Howard. That's the only thing you can do to keep him in the net. Do not trade a top 6 pick, a top 6 pick, where you can get an impact player. I just don't understand the logic behind that with the New Jersey Nets. I think they've made a lot of bad decisions in the past couple of years. I think a lot of them have been basically premeditated because they're moved to Brooklyn. They have to have superstar power on their team. And I think they've made some gravely errors in their decision making. I think some of their decision making has been really, really bad. And that they haven't, and it could cost them, especially if Darren Williams leaves. the Nets are going to be one of those teams. They'll be bad for a long, long time. But there's always that small chance he stays and that they're able to acquire Dwight Howard. I just don't know if they're going to be able to get a deal done in between now and the start of free agency. Because if Darren Williams walks, Dwight Howard will not be a Brooklyn Net. They can conceivably move into a new arena next year with no star power whatsoever. With literally no one on their roster.
Well, you bring up some good points there, because there's obviously a time to buy, a time to sell, a time to get veteran leadership, a time to rebuild, kind of clear out the payroll, start from scratch, get a new core, and go again like the early 90s, mid-90s Indians. You get a nice core of people and you move forward together. And we've talked about this on the program before, that the Cavs did the best that they could with who was available at the time based on the current salaries they had. It was a weird set of circumstances, and now you have in the NBA Finals, you have one player who left an owner willing to do whatever it took to win. I mean, bringing in Shaquille O'Neal, bringing in Antoine Jameson, Joe Smith, getting Zadrunas back, going out and getting Delonte West and Mo Williams, and improving the team so it was the deepest team in the NBA for a couple of years in a row. You have a situation where Kevin Durant signed the long-term deal with the small market Oklahoma City Thunder, and then the situation where LeBron James left an owner that was willing to spend whatever it took to bring a championship. Can you talk about the difference between the mindset of players? Like you said, what's going to happen down in Orlando? Is Howard going to stay? What's going to happen in Brooklyn?
I think Dwight Howard's going to leave. I think it just depends where. I think it all depends on what happens. I mean, I just can't give you an answer on whether he's going to Brooklyn or not. I think the way he winds up in Brooklyn is for a trade, and he'll sign a long-term extension if that happens. If not, I can see him leaving for Dallas next summer. It just depends. It just depends what Orlando thinks they can get for him.
Right.
I think that's a huge question. But, I think Durant looked at LeBron's situation and basically said, I don't want to put myself in the middle of that. It's bad for my teammates. I'm happy in Oklahoma City playing in a small market. I'm happy here. I have a ton of talent surrounding me. I have James Harden. I have Russell Westbrook. I have Serge Ibaka. We have a decent bench too. I think he looked at that situation and goes, if I leave anywhere, the situation's not going to get better. Granted, I could be in a big market like New York or something, but I think Kevin Durant's very happy in Oklahoma City, and he'll maximize his value, especially if they win a championship. Everybody in the league knows who Kevin Durant is. It took a couple of years, for just the average basketball fan to go, oh yeah, Kevin Durant's a star. Everyone knows he's a star now. He's playing in the NBA Finals, especially if he wins. With today's social media and everything, you don't need to be in a city like New York in order to.
New York didn't fix Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony was nice and comfortable and consecutive playoff runs. Yeah, they need to do a couple of different things in Denver, but everyone knew he was a superstar there. You don't need the big markets. They need you.
I still never felt that Carmelo was a superstar, though. I've always felt in my mind that Carmelo Anthony was always a number two option on a great team. He's never one of those guys who could be a number one. I just don't think he's good enough to be a number one. I mean, look at the Knicks. If Carmelo Anthony was really that good, the New York Knicks would not be a 40-win team.
Okay.
And I think that's problem number one with the Knicks is that they're going to be stuck in mediocrity for a long time. Even if Jeremy Lin does play well, I just don't think they're. I think they signed up. I think they were too quick to pair Amari and Carmelo, not worrying about the consequences. Oh yeah, we'll just pair two superstars together, even though they don't fit. That's the thing is Amari was playing very well before Carmelo came over in the trade last year. And then after the trade, he was awful. He just didn't fit with the system. And now Amari's contract is virtually untradeable. He had an uninsured contract due to his microfracture knee surgery when he was younger. And the Knicks situation is just a disaster with Carmelo there. I mean, granted, they have star power and they're going to be on TV all the time, but that doesn't translate into victories. I'll tell you that right now. I think Kevin Durant just wants to win. He likes his current situation. I think he's just very happy where he is and he's comfortable.
And to me, it looks. I'm picking it. I'm picking that OKC is going to win in 7, and I'm not picking with my heart. I'm not picking with what I hope is going to happen. I'm looking at the depth. I'm looking at a whole lot of different factors, and I'm just seeing that. Yes, I'm agreeing with you. It might be a long series, but I just think with Ibaka and Kendrick Perkins and Derek Fisher and just the rest of the roster that you know about on OKC, it just looks like they're going to inevitably pull this out in a long series. What do you think is going to happen with Durant and the Thunder and James and the Heat in the finals?
I think if the big three perform like they did last night, where you have Wade and Bosh and LeBron all in their games at the same time, I really think they're tough to beat. I really don't know if you can beat them if the whole team is on. But like I said earlier, that was one of the first games in a long time that all three players have been on at the same time, and they still almost lost. So I think, like I said, you have to take Oklahoma City's depth into consideration, and you have to take. I mean, Kevin Durant has the clutch gene in him. I mean, look what he's done in the fourth quarter of this series. He's been fantastic. I believe 32 points so far in the fourth quarter so far through 2 games. I mean, which is just, I mean, he's putting up absurd numbers in the fourth. You know, Russell Westbrook, I think, needs to limit his shooting, though, you know, during the game sometimes. I think that could, you know, cost him sometimes. He tends to shoot the ball too much, and, you know, it could cost him. Durant needs to be the one taking the majority of the shots. You know, he's a fantastic shooter. Just look what he did last night when Westbrook stopped shooting the ball and started giving him the floor space to, you know. But like I said, I had Oklahoma City 1 last night. I would have said OKC in 5. I'm saying Oklahoma City in 7 now. I think Oklahoma City needs to swipe one. Obviously, they need to at least swipe one game and take it back to Oklahoma City. But, you know, it'd be fantastic for them if they could take 2 and go up 3-2 heading back to Oklahoma City. They'd give them a really nice cushion.
Well, you're not the only one. You and I are both seeing a long series. We're both seeing OKC pulling it out. In the end, when we talked with 10-time Emmy Award-winning sportscaster John Telich of Fox 8 News, he said this was a while ago he was on our program, and he called it too. He said OKC before OKC was a popular thing to say. He just said that team's looking really tough. I don't see anyone beating them, so we'll see how that happens. Let me hit the reset button here real quick. We are talking with Zak Baris, NBA scout and lifelong Cleveland sports fan. My name is Brian Engelman. You're listening to the Unhappy Hour on the NewAmericanMedia.com.